This is how stupid fighters are. They think, and they're underpaid, and that's a whole nother story. And people are like, I don't understand why more fighters don't ask for better pay. This is why. This dude is brainwashed that thinks he's being a company man by not taking the lawsuit money. He thinks that he's showing loyalty to the fucking man by not taking this money that he's earned. That's how brainwashed a lot of these fighters are.
All right, so as they say, a broken clock is right twice a day, because for the first time in a while, I'm finding myself agreeing with Brendan Schaub. Given I think it's a pretty cold take that I feel like a lot of people are going to agree with him on, but seeing as this guy usually has the most brain-dead opinions on things, I'll give credit where credit is due. That's not to say that I think that there's no benefit to Renato Moicano refusing a $200,000 legal payout, because I definitely think he's playing the game so that he can further his standing in the UFC's good graces. I can honestly see this working out for him, because we all know how Dana loves to reward those who lick his boot, but more importantly, the guy can do whatever he wants with his life. And although we can look at this situation in a vacuum and see this as some sort of isolated incident of Moicano standing by his principles and showing solidarity with Dana, I think it's important to keep in mind that all of this stems back to the UFC settlement on its recent antitrust lawsuit and how they've been underpaying fighters since forever. All of this comes back to the UFC using scummy business practices, taking advantage of its fighters, and doing everything that they can to limit competition. And yeah, in this video, I'm going to be talking about all this and more. But first, let's talk about the beef that's been brewing between Schaub and Moicano. This all started a couple of days ago when, on the Show Me the Money podcast, Renato very proudly had this to say.
You know how much I love UFC?
Yeah.
I did not pay the money that they sent to the fighters. The lawsuit, yeah.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Wait,
That's
so,
that's
hold on. So they sent you from the settlement. They sent
Yes.
you money and you didn't accept
yeah,
it.
I just had to put my name over there. But
Okay,
I did
so
not
when they
take
sent
it.
you the actual check, or you're saying you didn't sign it?
I did not sign it.
Look, I feel like the guy should have just accepted the payout and keep on doing what he's doing in his career, but I'm also not the sort of person to get angry or upset at a guy that I don't know personally making financial decisions that I don't agree with. Again, it is his life and he can do whatever he wants to do, but let's also not pretend like this isn't him making a play towards securing a better position in the UFC. For someone who's completely rebranded himself as a guy that's obsessed with money and will literally give economic lectures during his post-fight interviews, I'm sure that he's turning down $200,000 right now so that he can hopefully curry his goodwill with Dana to negotiate a better contract in the future. To be able to turn down a guaranteed $200,000 check is such a privilege, but if he can gain some Dana White privilege as a result, then I think it might be a valid play. But I will say that if he refused the $200,000 with no other ulterior motives behind it, then I think that this is a dumb move. Would I personally pocket the lawsuit check? Definitely. But do I think that there's benefits to him turning it down? Sure. Do I think that this will work out for him exactly the way that he sees it? Maybe. At the end of the day, the guy's making a bet on himself, and I can respect that even though I don't agree with it.
But they went through saying that UFC did not pay the fighters fair enough. But this is like, let's say, you get a girl today and you fuck her, and like 2 years later he say, hey, the guy raped me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because that's what it is, you know?
No, Renato, these are not the same things. First of all, the false equivalency of trying to compare a criminal act like sexual assault to a civil lawsuit regarding unfair labor practices kind of makes my head hurt. But the bigger thing is, the fighters in the lawsuit aren't saying we were okay with this back then, but now we're mad. They're saying we had no choice but to accept these contracts and conditions because the UFC created a monopoly that left us with no other options. The whole point of the lawsuit is fighters saying that the UFC contracts and just the way that they operate in general aren't even fair to begin with, and frankly, they're still just as unfair today.
Because I remember my first fight in
agree to your fair
UFC
market
was
value.
8-8. Was 8-8 to fight. And then what they say is, hey, you know that 8-8 that was wrong with you because they take advantage of you. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, you have a girl and then somebody talk to the girl, hey, the guy abused you and this and that. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay, but it is wrong to be paying fighters $8K to show and $8K to win. The entire show-win pay structure is unbelievably stupid to begin with, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but even in the case of Moicano here, where he won his UFC debut and made $16K, that's still not enough, because that $16K after taxes, gym fees, and manager fees probably nets out closer to $10K maybe. Should a professional athlete who had to work their way to fighting in the biggest MMA promotion in the world really be making that little money? And I understand that supply and demand is a thing, and that UFC newcomers aren't making the company a single dime, but the promotion can still afford to pay all of their fighters a living wage. I said this in a previous video, but something that I feel like the UFC refuses to acknowledge is that if they made the value proposition of pursuing being a fighter more lucrative, then that will attract better athletes to the sport. In turn, there will be better fights, hopefully more interesting fighters, and the UFC will still be highly profitable. Let's look at how much the UFC pays its fighters compared to other major sports. The NFL pays its players roughly 48% of its total yearly revenue, which is actually a decrease from when it used to be an even 50-50 split. The NBA also pays its players roughly 50% of its yearly revenue. MLB players receive, surprise, surprise, about 50% of yearly revenue. Now, you might be saying that it's unfair to compare the revenue share of team sports to the UFC, and even though I'm not sure that's actually true, I will indulge that argument. Let's look at boxing, which of course is the only other major combat sport in the world. Boxing pays out 62.5 to 71% of its yearly revenue to its fighters, mainly because boxing is a decentralized sport and not a monopoly. With all those numbers in mind, in 2024, the UFC paid its fighters about 15% of its total generated revenue. And why does the UFC do this? Because they fucking can. They're the only major MMA promotion on this side of the planet, and let's be real, they're the only major promotion in the entire world, and if they want to take advantage of its fighters, then what other competition do they have to make them change their ways? You know, it's funny how people say that just because I make videos criticizing fighters whenever they do or say dumb things, that doesn't make me a true fan, but I think the fact that I want to see all UFC fighters make enough money where they don't need to worry about their finances or be a driver for Uber Eats says otherwise. I honestly don't understand the UFC fans who defend how much Dana pays his athletes. They seriously make it seem like him paying them more somehow takes money out of their pockets. If you call yourself a UFC fan and you don't think that they should make more than 15% of its total revenue, then you are not a real fan. You are a fan of Dana White and not the fighters themselves, and that's not an issue in and of itself, but don't pretend like fighter pay is okay when all the data indicates that they are grossly underpaid. And yes, I allegedly illegally stream most pay-per-views, as do many other fans, and yet the UFC still finds ways to break records year after year. Go figure. It's almost as if the media rights deals, in-cage sponsorships, on-air sponsorships, and all the other streams of revenue that they have generate them a fuckzillion dollars.
Billion, not a million, not 100 million, $1 billion deal. I want you to ask your agent or manager how much of a percentage you're getting of that $1 billion deal. Now, if you don't want to ask them, I'll do you a fucking solid right now and tell you how much you're going to get. Zero. You're going to receive zero of the dollar, sir. When you look at here's another example. When you look at the UFC Octagon and you see 25 companies, when they're paying millions of dollars on that Octagon mat and on the bars and all that, millions per company. How many dollars, what percentage do you see? Ask your agent. I'll do you a solid. I'll tell you how much you're getting. Zero.
Again, Brendan's making an uncharacteristically good point here. There is not a chance that the UFC is taking their own sponsorship and endorsement money from Toyo Tires or Modelo and reallocating it towards fighter purses in any meaningful way. They are pocketing the money themselves so that Dana can blow $500,000 a night at the poker tables and so that Ari Emanuel can buy a fourth yacht. We have sponsorships littered across the Octagon itself. There are ads being read by John Anik in between and during the fights themselves, and they even have Bruce Buffer reading off sponsorships before main events now. The UFC has 9,000 gratuitous sponsorships running at every event, so can someone tell me why the fighters can't have some of their own?
When they took the sponsors from your shorts and your fucking t-shirt, your walkout shirt, when they took that money and decided to put it on the Octagon and give you zero, you are by no means moving up the ladder by not accepting this money. You're only doing disservice to yourself and your family.
To this day, I still feel like this is the most egregious thing that the UFC has ever done to its fighters. Taking away sponsorships from their shorts, as well as that little tarp thing that they used to have in the back, was such an evil way to screw over the fighters in pursuit of the company earning more money through apparel exclusivity. Fighters went from making upwards of $100,000 a fight through their personal sponsorships to getting paid peanuts by Reebok. Many fighters were actually able to live a comfortable life off the back of their sponsorships alone. Fighters like Ben Henderson, Rory McDonald, and Gegard Mousasi publicly criticized the deal, and Mousasi even says that a big reason why he left the UFC for Bellator was because of Reebok. Dana can say that he wanted to make the UFC look more professional and standardize what the athletes wore, much like other professional sports, but at the end of the day, he just saw this as another revenue stream to prop up the UFC's valuation before getting acquired by WME-IMG. Oh yeah, Dana, you want to take away fighter sponsors so that the UFC can look more like the NBA or NFL? Well, are you willing to split your revenue with your athletes on the same level as the NBA or NFL? Because if you're not, then you're literally just taking money from them. This is such a dumb excuse from Dana. Literally every major individual sport, from boxing to F1 to tennis, all have athletes that prominently display their own personal sponsorships, but Mr. Krabs over here is the only guy greedy enough to take that away from his athletes. Now, I don't know how to transition to this part smoothly, but the show-win pay model of the UFC is stupid, and even Joe Rogan thinks so too.
It's like having a win bonus or something.
I don't like win bonuses
like,
either.
I hate win bonuses.
Yeah, me too. I don't like.
I don't like.
I don't like.
I
win
like
bonus.
boxing set up better, where you have a you have a contract. You're going to get paid $10 million, whatever it is. That's what you get. You don't get $10 million, but you only get $5 million if a shitty judge gives it to the other guy, which we've seen so many times in the UFC. Guys lose half their paycheck because of a bad decision.
The win bonuses are just another underhanded tactic designed to pay fighters less. And seeing as everything that the UFC does these days, from the Apex to the fight announcements, are all ways to save money, the fact that the win bonuses have been a tried and true practice since Dana became head of the company speaks to how effective it's been throughout the years at helping the company's bottom line. And they can claim how the win bonuses make these pro fighters fight harder or whatever, but that's just a bunch of bullshit. When it's all said and done, this whole debate about whether or not Renato Moicano should have taken the 200K is just a symptom of how the UFC is taking and has always taken advantage of their greatest asset, which is the fighters. Dana's mistreatment of the fighters goes all the way back to Randy Couture, who used to be the UFC's golden boy until he started asking for more, and now he's done everything in his power to erase him from the company's history. Unfair pay, limiting income opportunities, and cornering the market are just a few examples of how the UFC has screwed over its athletes, and I'm really curious to see what other creative moves they'll pull to take it even further, because it's bound to happen eventually. So sure, Moicano probably should have taken the 200K and put it to good use, but the real mistake he made was thinking that Dana and the UFC care about him. Anyways, that is the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about what Brendan Schaub had to say on the matter. Do you think Moicano should have taken the money, and what's the most scummy thing the UFC's ever done? As always, if you liked the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Moicano responded to that saying it has nothing to do with the UFC. I don't expect the UFC to treat me well because of this. The UFC is a company. A company doesn't quote unquote like you. They want to profit. This is about principles. I knew about the deal. I signed the contract. A contract is nothing more than your word. I'm not going back on my word just to gain a financial benefit. I don't expect anyone to understand that. And so again, he has his reasons. Ultimately, I don't think taking the money represents going back on your word or spitting in their face or not honoring your deal. It has just been deemed that you were owed a little bit more.